Hey, welcome to another Parent Pivot podcast. We're so glad you're with us. We come at you every Tuesday with some new content. I am one of your hosts, Steve Cummings.
And I'm Julia Cummings.
And I'm excited about our guest that we have with us today. I'm going to cut right to the chase.
Yes,
because,
please do.
Yeah, stop hitting my chair and things. Because I'm good friends with Seth Barnes. Let me just give you a little quick intro about Seth. Seth is the son of a physician. So he's like dad was a doctor.
Smart.
But this physician of his dad, his life was changed by listening prayer. And I want to tell Seth, he probably doesn't know this yet, and we'll get to that, but I've been impacted by our kids who've taught us about listening prayer, who learned it from Adventures in Mission, where Seth has founded it. And they've taken over 100,000 people in the mission field. It's probably more than that now. But he just lives up the road from us here in Georgia and stuff. So Seth Barnes, welcome to the Parent Pivot podcast.
Thank you, Steve.
So the post you put on LinkedIn was about a blog that you had. I think you guys were taking a group on the world race. And so I'd love for you to tell our listeners about that. We can start back at the beginning. How did you have this idea for Adventures in Mission? And you can even really kind of connect it to your dad teaching about listening prayer, because I don't think I've heard the story. You and I have sat on your porch and we've talked. And if we've talked about this, I don't remember, but I think it's great for our listening audience to kind of hear some background on this. And then I want to talk about this post you did about your blog, because we have jumped in wholeheartedly with that with our adult kids and stuff. So walk us through how Adventures in Mission started and where this all came from.
I've been blessed with a background, diverse background, business, missions, a lot of things. I write, but I always felt like I had a call to ministry, and it was just kind of complicated when I got fired. And I thought, maybe I should just stick to something I know I can do, which is to earn money. And I had 5 children, actually 4 children and a very pregnant wife. Didn't have any insurance. Those were hard days. And I just didn't really trust God, because his people seemed to not do well in terms of helping to care for me and my family. And it was in those days that we went on a marriage retreat, Karen and I. And to top everything off, I discovered I had difficulty in my marriage. So my knees were buckling, and I got a chance to just kind of ask God, what do you even think of me? And to my utter surprise, he spoke in a way that was just so incontrovertible, so amazingly, present and obvious, that I couldn't do anything but to recognize that this was God. And he said, Seth, I love you. And to hear that changed my life. Because I always wondered, do I have to just discern his voice through the Bible? Is that all I can do? And that's how I've been raised. And now I learned that God speaks in other ways as well. Certainly speaks through the Bible. Teach our kids the Bible, memorize the Bible as I was taught, but also pause and ask God questions, because he's a person. He loves to dialogue with us.
Yep.
That changed my life. When that happened, I'm like, okay, kids, we're going to learn something new about God. and that, impacted my ministry as well.
That's awesome. So walk us through, did God give you this idea to say, let's start taking people around the world? And what did Adventures and Missions, how did that come about?
My life had been impacted by my mission trips. My mom, I think mostly to get me out of the house when I was 17, sent me on a mission trip. And I discovered, I have so much relative to the rest of the world. We were in Guatemala, and the following year I went to Peru. And it just really impacted me. So when I went to college, I said, Lord, I'd like to go to the next level. What is that? And then when there was a genocide in Cambodia, he said, now's the time for that. And I was a senior in college, and I basically had to figure out how to graduate and go and begin to minister to these Cambodian refugees, and I was able to do that, and it just changed my life. And I thought, wow, if this can happen to me, it could happen to others as well. And so out of that came the world race and other things that really have impacted others.
Yeah. So we're big fans of Adventures in Mission. In fact,
And the world
and the
race.
world race. You
Yes.
want to tell how we got involved with that?
Yes. So our daughter, Jamie Lynn, who anybody who listens to the podcast regularly knows about Jamie Lynn. She went on the world race in 2018.
And we kind of wondered what's that? I mean, we were living
in Southern California originally when I heard about it. She
Right.
talked about doing it when she graduated from college. And we had moved up to Oregon. And it was the same time we left Oregon and moved here that she was also leaving on the world race. So
Right.
we all drove out here together. And 2 days later, she left on the world race.
Yeah.
So
And I
she
want to
was.
throw this in there. I mean, similar to Seth's background, our kids they grew up in a church where this was normal for them to do. They took
Yeah.
summer missions trips. Our kids have gone down to Quito, Ecuador, and Costa Rica, and very missions-minded churches. It was just part of our growing up in the
Right.
Cummings family at Calvary Church Santa Ana. And
Right.
shout out to all you friends out there listening to the podcast, because California is like one of our number one states. But that was the norm for us.
Right.
So we didn't think anything of it.
So when she said to us what this was, I think we were both very excited about it. Like, this is amazing. That is so great that you want to do that. And to hear your child's heart that they have this grand world perspective of sharing the gospel in some place other than where it's comfortable. And so we're very excited about that. She had to, at the time, and I'm sure this number has gone up, but at the time she had to raise $18,000.
I think that was
I believe
the
it was. And
which sounds like a lot, but she hit it well
Gosh.
before her due date.
yeah, she got it before she ever left, which I know a lot of kids continue to raise throughout the time of the race.
Yeah.
And for those of you who don't know what it is 11 months, 11 countries in 11 months. So every month they're going and serving with missionaries who live in that country, and all of the world races. And you can explain this more, Seth, but all of the races go to different countries and, around the world. So, and they only go to places that, like, they wouldn't send anyone to Israel right now, right? So they wouldn't send people to places that are not safe.
He went to a place where there was a genocide going on, and
Yeah,
the word
but
genocide strikes fear in the hearts of people.
that's true.
But this is where I want this podcast to go: is the perception that, oh my gosh, there's all these awful things happening in our
In the
world.
world.
I can't let my adult child go on this. And the whole point of our conversation with Seth is to saying, hey, there's a lot to invest in your adult child with them and to let them go and stuff. So
Yeah, can I say one more thing about that too? Along the way, and Seth, I know that you've probably have tons of stories like this, but we have heard stories where parents basically threatened their kids if they went, that
Right.
we're not going to pay for college when you get back, or you're going to have to do this or whatever. You can't live with us when you get back. I mean, I've heard all kinds of things where parents so badly don't want their adult children to do this that they are threatening them with consequences if they do this. And that's just a really hard reality, I'm sure, for a lot of these young adults. So anyway, saying my piece, you tell us about it and what your thoughts are.
Well, I don't think there's ever been a safer time to serve God. It's been a lot more dangerous in years past, and we've got so many things that make the world safe. Yet we have a generation of parents that live in fear, that they're trying to anticipate every bad thing that could happen with their kids. The irony is that to grow, we know this from our muscles, the way they grow, we need friction, we need resistance, we build strength by coming up against things that are difficult. So actually, a lot of parents with the best of intentions have preserved this comfort zone around their children, that the children, they need something that will cause them to have to stress out and have to develop spiritual muscles they haven't had.
Yeah.
And if we look at Jesus, he's calling people out not to safety, but to danger.
Mm.
And he says, "Follow me," and he says, "Take up your cross," and which is an instrument of execution.
Right.
And he says, they may kill you in Matthew 10. I mean, anybody wants to kind of look at the biblical basis for what we do.
Mm.
Look at Matthew 10. I mean, Jesus did not make it easy for his disciples then, nor does he want it to be easy for us. I look at God as a family man, and I say, God is a father. I mean, let's just set aside the fact that he's the deity and he's different than us. We're made in his image, and there is this fathering aspect which a father initially raises up and protects his kids, but at some point he launches his kids.
Mm.
And the father has got kids out there in the world, like his humanity is they're his children, and he wants to rescue the perishing. He wants to rescue the widow and the orphan.
Mm-hmm.
In James 1:27, it says, true religion is to care for the widow and orphan in their distress. How are we doing with that? Are we going to do it in our, safe little environments? I think that God is looking for his children to go into places that are complicated and dark, and to rescue those kids that he's got there that don't have anybody to protect them.
Mm.
So with the world race, we do take precautions, and we're constantly assessing risk. But at the same time, I think the biggest risk that we can take is to not trust God in hard places.
Yeah.
And all 5 of our kids we've sent out, and they have returned so much better. And yesterday I had a birthday, and my son, who is now 40, wrote
Wow.
me. He wrote me a letter, and he said, "Thanks so much for trusting the Lord to give me faith, to not try and be muscling it up for me, but allow me to develop my own muscles
Wow.
and to do hard things." So I could tell you more about how that's worked, but I've seen it play out in spades for our kids, and so many other kids along the way, where God has gifts along the way, but there's also hardship initially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I would say our daughter had stories of definite hardship and definite months that were difficult.
Well, and when you say difficult, they're sleeping in places where there's bugs and things
Right,
crawling, and I mean
right.
that just puts first world problems. Like, really,
Yeah.
we're worried about internet connections. Like, we struggled to even have this interview before we started,
Right.
and there's bugs and stuff like that. But just all sorts of things. And what I loved about the world race is I think there was a couple months where they did ATL. Now, for those of you who don't live in the Atlanta area, it doesn't stand for Atlanta. Okay, they're partnered up in these 11 months with different mission organizations, pre-planned. You're going to come in. We're going to break. They're already in squads. They're going to go in 5 different directions and do stuff and whatever. But a couple of times, 2 or 3 times, they do what's called ATL, which is Ask the Lord, and it's like, okay, they're going to, I forget what countries Jamie Lynn went to.
Well, one of them that stands out to me was India, that she was doing ATL, and that was her hardest month.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
But like you said, they come back not afraid to do hard things.
Yeah.
Because they went to India for a month, didn't meet a missionary there. Their squad gets together and they pray and they listen, which is like, oh, wait, you're supposed to listen when you pray? We're so taught to just talk and pray, but they did listening prayer and stuff. And they just felt, okay, the Father's leading us here. The Holy Spirit's leading us here. We're going to go, I don't know, help this woman with this cow. I don't know. Or I think Jamie Lynn stopped eating bacon when she saw a pig getting slaughtered.
Yeah, I don't remember what street that was, but yeah.
But they come back so much more confident in their faith. And when our kids came back, they started a house church. We're like, oh, and of course, here's Pastor Steve, who's gone to seminary. Oh, sweetheart, what are we talking about tonight? And how's the order? And she looks at me and goes, Dad, we're just gonna let the Spirit. What'd she call it?
She called it sailing.
Sailing. We're gonna sail. I'm like,
Yeah.
What does that mean? We're gonna let the Holy Spirit lead. Okay.
Right.
And I learned so much, Seth, about the Holy Spirit and everything from my kids who went on the world race.
Yes.
Yeah. Such a wonderful thing when we expect intergenerational ministry to kind of flow down from us with all of our wisdom and experience, but instead it flows the other direction. And
Yeah.
we actually have to humble ourselves and learn from our kids. If we're able to just set aside our expectations, and that's been one of the best things, one of the best gifts God's given me is to allow my kids to teach me, and I've seen it happen over and over again with parents and their kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you explain to our audience, because we're using the term listening prayer?
Uh-huh.
You wrote a book specifically on that. Can you explain that in a nutshell of what that means?
Yeah. I think people superimpose a lot of meanings that maybe are specious and don't come from the Bible on that term.
Mm.
Mostly what I take it to mean, when I kind of, I don't know, maybe Leanne Payne wrote a book on hearing God. There are others, and it goes all the way back to the disciples themselves or the prophets in the Old Testament. It's just giving God space and not just having a dialogue that is, essentially a monologue, where I'm
Mm.
talking at God, but I
Mm.
stop and maybe I'll look in Scripture, maybe uh, I'll be with somebody else and I'll look to them for what they may be hearing, but I'm just creating space for God to speak. And oftentimes he doesn't. Oftentimes I don't know. I'm just kind of floundering. But by creating space, I can lean into the possibility that it is a dialogue, that this is a relationship. We talk about a personal relationship, but all relationships I've ever had, they go both ways. They don't just kind of. It's not
Yeah.
just didactic with me saying the words, and there's listening that's involved. So it's mostly about the posture of one's heart to expect that maybe God's got something to say. And how else do we practice lordship but that he would interrupt us and ask us to do things that maybe we wouldn't come up with on our own?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for the parent, I'm a parent and I've got some adult children. I'm just trying to create a scenario.
Yeah.
Uh,
And my son or daughter is, I think what's the age? Usually you do a gap year thing. So the age is 18,
Gap
19.
year 18 to 22 would be gap year, and
Okay.
then and 21 and older would be an 11 and 11 experience,
Yeah.
which is usually people that have already graduated from college or who have
Right.
had a job.
And into their early 30s. Does that sound right? Or mid 30s, or is
That's
it
right.
beyond that?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would even imagine maybe some parents aren't even involved because their adult child's like going, I'm going, I'm raising the money, boom, I'm off, and they've already
Yeah.
been launched
Yeah.
and they're loving it and things like that. And one of where I always wanted to go with this is like I can imagine that you might have at least a story or two where maybe you had some fearful parents.
Yeah.
They come to the launch. I mean, we literally moved across country, threw our stuff in storage, hightailed it down to the Hilton hotel down at the airport for
Right.
lunch with Jamie Lynn, literally like the next day. And we're
Uh-huh.
there and, we're having conversations with other parents. And so I'm sure you might have a story or two to tell about some parents who are just like, I don't know about this.
So many parents, and I think it's become epidemic in our time. I've just seen it used to be helicopter parents, now it's more bulldozer parents.
Oh, wow.
That
So,
and it's to be fair, it's a complicated world, and social media has made it more complicated.
yeah,
Yeah.
And yeah, we know the country's divided, and we know that there are bad things out there, and maybe the job of parenting isn't finished. That's one reason that recently we created an extension of the World Race called Journey School, which allows young people to go through a college experience still, but on the mission field. So they get community, they get missions, but they also can have academics. And
Yeah.
that's been just a great initial thing. So we're seeing quite a response to that. And the parents just, they like continuing to be involved. But at some point, the job of parenting is mostly done, and it's time for the child to be able to act as an adult. How else do they make the transition?
yeah,
I mean,
Right.
the worst story I can recall that illustrates how ridiculous it can be is that there was a young man that went on the world race. It's been a number of years now, and his mother called me up, and he's 25 years old. And she says, I don't think my child should go on this. And I'm like, thinking to myself, well, 25 years old, how is that a child? And I said, well, maybe he has got some things at his age that he needs to be deciding for himself. We went back and forth. She was not pleased. Bottom line, he did go on the world race. Bottom line, it did change his life. He was already an accountant, and he got a job as an accountant coming out of there. I just, she had issues that were her experience. She'd had some bad experiences. And so she transferred those, superimposed those experiences on him. And we can't do that as parents. Yeah, we've got to be prudent.
Yeah.
But by the time your child's 18, you might have 5 to 10% influence left. If you've got any influence now, it's time to maybe just develop influence through relationship and friendship, and then you get invited into their space more.
Yes.
But you'll actually make things worse for yourself in terms of your relationship if you're doing things for them that they should be doing for themselves.
Yep. No, it's always good to have a guest on who basically affirms everything we've been saying for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
However many years we've been doing this. It's like,
No, I've taken these hundreds of thousands and I've seen it done well. I've seen it done poorly. I've got a good data set.
yeah.
And I got my own kids.
Yeah. You mentioned in that blog that we'll put a link to it in our show notes. That's basically that your kids were made for a broken world. And we've already talked a little bit about that, but talk a little bit about Gen Z. I mean, a lot of people have written them off, they're addicted to their phones, yada, yada, yada. What are you saying about Gen Z?
Well, it's true. I mean, it was 2015, and we were seeing our applications, and we'd get, I don't know, 10,000 or so applications every year. We'd take maybe, 1 out of 9. And but I saw things deteriorate, and there were there's just a lot of junk coming up in the applications. I went to the admissions department. I said, what is going on? When did this shift? Has it shifted? And they said, oh, it has shifted so much now that we have to sift through many more applications to get a good one. And I said, when did it start? And they said 2013. Do you know
And
that there's
can you
a,
pause for just a second, Seth? What's the difference between "quote unquote" a good one and you said they're sifting through? Do you know what were you looking for?
oh man, everybody, all the boys are addicted to pornography, number one. That's just a given. And what we were seeing is the girls too. And we were seeing that in some cases there was the egregious case that I saw was a girl who had been taking care of like kindergartners and was he sexually abusive. Like, what in the world? I had never seen anything like that. And
Yeah.
so we began seeing just more kind of gross stuff. And so interestingly enough, if you follow the researcher out of New York, Jonathan Haidt, he's a New
Yes.
York
That's,
University professor.
yeah, the anxious
And
separation.
yeah, and he has done the studies, and he has shown that it did in fact flip in 2013. Why? Because of the confluence of social media and your iPhone. Like all of a sudden, things just radically shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing all the poor results in terms of parenting. So hey, parents are doing the best they can. They're fighting a lot in society and social media. It's true. And what are we going to do? That's the question. All right, we need to make adaptations. Let's change some things. I can tell you stories about how I've seen lives changed. I can tell you stories about how people have been in a place of brokenness, and because they were broken, they had to rely on God more, and because of that, they came to a place of intimacy. I think that's generally the trend that we see as people set down their phones and make space for God and for community as they go out on mission.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Oh,
awesome.
yeah. Really great. Well, I know I can speak for our experience and that it was a good experience. That doesn't mean that every kid, every adult child, every
We call them kids.
20, 30 something comes out of it put together and on fire. I know from my daughter's own experience, I know that there were people on her group,
Squad.
squad, thank you, couldn't think of the word, squad that struggled afterward.
Well,
And so there,
they even had to leave while they were on the race
yeah,
because, as you
there's,
said, there was an addiction issue or something like that.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there are the things that, you know, you get back into the real world, and I'm sure you have stories about this as well, where these kids come home and life isn't perfect. And
Yeah,
so you've got both of those things to be true, that can be true with them coming off of the world race and being on fire, more confident, all of those things, more sure of their faith. And then those that leave, I don't know, and maybe you can speak to this, but I can speak to my from my own experience. Like when I'd go to camp as a kid, and you'd have the mountain high, and I'd come back, and everybody else was the same, and so then
right.
I'm having to wrestle with my new, you know, growth in my faith, and all of these people who didn't go to camp, who
Yeah.
were living the same life, and I'm having to come into that world. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I look at Jesus, and I mean, we try and emulate the pattern that we see Jesus and his disciples. And he took 3 years. And
Yeah.
at the end of 3 years, his best disciple, the one that he said, I'll build my church on you, you know, he was failing. So
Yes.
the best of his disciples is getting F's at the end of his, 3 year term. So I say probably 4 years would be a great place to start in terms of time frames.
Mm,
And yeah, the world race is only like a 1 year thing. And optimally, you'd have churches that welcome you back, and you'd be in an environment where the values that you learn, the values of community, the values of simplicity, the values of ministering, like where you see those continuing to be replicated. But
yeah.
often that isn't the case.
Yeah.
And so you have these kind of radical experiences, and you see a God of power and intimacy on the field, but you don't see that same God back home, and it is terribly confusing.
Yeah.
So it's been one of the hard things about this. I want to do more, and we've talked about your home church, and that's a good venue. I mean, so let's find partners that are wanting to continue those kinds of experiences when you get back home. I'll
Hmm.
tell you the story of my son. I mentioned him earlier, but he went on a it's hard growing up in my shadow. When he was 5, I took him on his first mission trip, and I've taken him all over the place. And he's grown up with that, but at some point he had to make his faith his own. That's what he
Yeah.
wrote me this letter
Yes.
about yesterday. And what that looked like is when they were in the Philippines, and uh, his little team was in a hospital, and they were with a family whose son Marvin had meningitis, and what they did is he needed a ventilator. He needed air to
Mm.
be pumped into his lungs, but they didn't have a ventilator, so they had to hand pump the air into his lungs. And his Seth's team got to help, and they got to buy medicines for them. But that poor kiddo, he didn't make it. He died,
Mm.
and they
Oh.
had prayed for him, and Seth was just broken over this. And he described an experience in the Philippines, maybe the following weekend, and they were hiking up a waterfall, and he says, I stood under the waterfall, and just the water cascading down over me, and in that waterfall, I heard God say, I've got this, Seth, trust
Mm.
me.
Mm.
And that's what he needed to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, they went to Africa, and in Africa, there was another similar incident with a little baby that they were caring for. Mom had AIDS. It was so rough. She malnourished child, and that baby died as well. But my son carried the mom because she was so weak to the gravesite, and they sang songs to that little baby.
Mm.
Mm.
And because he'd had that earlier experience in the Philippines, now he
Yeah.
was able to stand up under it, and
Yeah.
he was able to allow God to be God.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, he came back from all of that, and there's so many more experiences, and thought, well, I need to be in community. He did need, I mean, I was preaching this thing, and so he went to Colorado where some of the people live, didn't get community there.
Mm.
He had this job cleaning rugs, and it was just not a great experience. And a lot of young people, I think, do have that sort of there's not continuity between one experience and the other. I
Right.
wish it were different. I wish, I think the Mormons do better than we do.
Yeah,
They
they
send them
do.
out for 2 years. They come around them. I don't know. We need to figure this out if we want to raise up our young people to go further than we did.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just seen so much fruit from allowing our kids to go out there. And I mean, one thing we haven't talked about is like two of our kids got engaged while they were in the sister organization of G42
Yeah.
in
Yep.
Mijas, Spain. But Jamie Lynn and Taylor met on the world race.
Well, kind of in a roundabout way.
Not on the
Yes.
same squad at the same
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
but as they were passing in trainings and stuff like that and things. So I remember him calling me on the phone, and he wants to go propose to Jamie Lynn. I said, hey, hold the fort. I've got a book you need to read and stuff. And he read it. He was great. And
Well, and he was at the time being a leader
right,
on the world race.
he was a squad
and
leader.
He was in
Romania?
or Ecuador.
I don't know,
Romania or
but he had to
Ecuador,
go down
something
to
like that.
he had to go to South America, or whatever, to catch up with Jamie Lynn or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
And now we have grandchildren out of the deal.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fruit, folks. I'm talking to you parents out there. There's a lot of things that can happen if you just release your kids to the Lord and trust Him, because you want to raise responsible adult children, adult kids, and you're pivoting from being this parent who's instructional to a partner now who's going to sit back and keep their mouth shut. And like we say every week, you can either be in a relationship or you can be right, but you can't do both.
Yeah.
And really launching our adult kids to do what can be some scary stuff.
Yeah.
If you're going to sit there and be married to the news, you're going to be in anxiety 365 days of the year.
Yeah.
But the God of this world oversees all of that.
Yeah.
And He's got bigger things for our adult kids.
And honestly, my biggest fear when Jamie Lynn went was that she would meet her future husband on the world race, but he would be a foreigner at one of the countries she was going.
Yeah, that does happen.
Exactly. And so I was like, what am I going to do? My daughter ends up in another country. And so that was probably my biggest fear.
Sure.
It wasn't so much about safety, but we as parents will always have fears. It just
and hey, of my 5 kids, now that one of them did not go on the world race, it didn't exist yet. She went to South Africa, and and she didn't get married. She went she's an actress, and she went with a drama ministry. But she was at a wedding here in America, and there was an Irishman, and they did fall in love, and she is currently his wife in Ireland. So that scenario can happen anywhere.
Yes,
that's true.
That is very true.
And again, I mean, we always tell parents, you've got to release your expectations and things, because seasons change. Your adult kids will make decisions that's not how you had it planned out.
Right.
But that's okay, because in it, there's still relationship that you want with your adult child, and our lives change. I get a chance to go to Ireland, let's say, or whatever. It's like, wow, there's now a reason to go to Ireland. My daughter lives there.
Right.
And things.
So if you had a piece of advice to parents who are listening, who have adult children in this age group, what is your number one piece of advice for them?
Well, first, before I gave advice, I would empathize. It's hard. And I don't know. I've heard that the average 18-year-old is maybe 5 years less mature than from our generation, the boomer generation.
Yeah.
Why? Because they're COVID babies, because of social media, because of overprotective parents who are responding in a good way. We should be protective of our kids. We should help them to navigate a complicated world. Yeah. But there's not really a good map now that helps us to know when do I release? First of all, I would say, release has to happen in the same way that in nature it always happens. You raise baby birds in a nest, and then those birds keep fouling the nest, and that's what they're doing. The kids playing video games in the basement at age 22, they're fouling the nest. It's time to move on, and so how do we cooperate with this natural order of things? I think if you know that your kid is delayed, well, get some partners, get some help. You've done the best you can do, and we it's exhausting. Being a parent is exhausting,
It
and you
is.
need some good partners to come alongside. Now, I can tell you that we haven't always done a good job. After COVID, we realized we had to triple the number of leaders that would go on a world race trip just to help these young people navigate. It wasn't the same. Gen Z was not the same as the millennial generation. And
Interesting.
so we made an adaptation. Like, we're working this, and we've written books about it, and we do trainings for parents, and we're learning all the time. We have feedback loops that help us to know if we can improve. You
Mm,
need that kind of a partner. I'm not saying yet go on the world race every time, but get a partner who's in it as deep as you are, who takes very serious a calling to help come alongside and to navigate in a way that looks like Jesus's journey with his disciples. I mean, that's
Yes.
ultimately, if I could give a gift to any parent, it would be your child deserves to see if what Jesus did with his disciples still works.
mm,
How you gonna do that? You can try
yes.
doing it on your own. I mean, I don't know any parents that are trying to do it on their own. The ones that succeed go and find partners, and
Mm,
they learn to trust the partners. And they have a robust conversation with somebody like me to see if it's a good fit. I'm We're not, bending over backwards and have to have people go on the race to financially stay afloat. We're very discriminating, and we need to have a good fit before we commit ourselves to continue to disciple a kid. Find people like that will take your values and help your child to run with them and to put them at risk, because they're only going to own them if they put them at risk.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I want to ask you a question about this because you brought it up. You said something about the 22-year-old in the basement playing video games.
Yeah,
This is very common. Um, that 18 to 25 age, a lot of parents seeing their children flounder after high school or after college, of not being able to sustain themselves, of, in a sense, kind of giving up, not feeling a purpose, falling into depression, um, many things like this. This is very real across the board with many parents of
right.
things that they're struggling with. And I'm just wondering if there is something that you can speak to for those parents that might be struggling with this. I mean, one of my pieces of advice to parents is always nobody belongs in the basement, get them upstairs. um, that's one thing, but
Yeah,
also you there has to be some way to get them out, to get them
yeah.
out of the house, to get them doing something, even if it's on a walk with you or whatever. But I'm just wondering if you've ever had on the world race a kid that came from this mental place that actually you saw them come to life, found purpose, things like that.
This is normal. Down through history, uh, young ladies, they get initiated because their bodies are changing, and because in childbearing, this is what happens.
Yeah.
Young men need an initiation experience.
Mm,
They don't have enough experience with pain. They don't know how to transform pain. They don't know. We all have pain in our lives. I mean, life is going to be filled with pain, and
mm,
many of us will get very sick and we'll lose people. And what do we do? And so we need experience with pain, but we serve a redemptive God. We need to meet that redemptive God in the place of pain. So this is what an initiation trip does. You can look at any society down through history, you'll find that young men are a mess, and they need to get out. They need to go on some kind of a journey where they're going to learn how to fight. They're going to have to fight for good and fight against evil, and they're going to have to learn to be productive. And their prefrontal cortex does not develop adequately until they're 25. I mean,
Yep.
all these things are just normal, natural processes that we need to work with. Instead, we have gentle parenting. Instead, we have like, oh, let me do that for you.
Yep.
And there's a book that just came out I saw yesterday where um, this lady's like an anthropologist, and she's looking at other, tribal situations, and the ones that have really thrived, they bring those young people, even as children, alongside them and
Yeah.
give them responsibilities
Yeah.
and give them the opportunity to just do a normal life instead of being waited on hand and foot. So I go, we got to have a better paradigm of parenting. We need a paradigm of parenting that is, maybe if you've got a child in the basement, give them not a big, I'm going to throw you into the deep end right now, but maybe they can go and put a toe in the water. What does
Mm-hmm.
that look like? Let's go to a homeless kitchen nearby.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just see how somebody on the other side of the tracks lives. And have they ever even encountered pain? Have they ever had the challenge of trying to pray for someone who really was in desperate straits?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I would, as a parent, I would begin just analyzing my own life. Am I too comfortable? Have I really done some hard things with my child? I remember, just because I believe this stuff, I would take my little children to the worst community in the country at the time, in terms of AIDS. They were mostly Haitian sugarcane workers, and I wanted my kids to be in that community, and we would do VBS and we would do other things, and that's why my kids are so amazing now, because early on I exposed them to stuff that challenged them,
Yeah.
and they had to ask the question, well, what do I believe?
Yeah.
Or maybe they just had the kinds of experiences that validated what I said polemically was true, but I'd never really shown them.
Mm-hmm.
And all parents, I think, need to get out from behind their world and into a world that God is crying over, and allow their children to touch that.
Yeah.
I
Now it
love
sounds
that.
like the
I love
Cummings
that.
family and the Barnes family have done similar things. We kicked our kids out at an early setting. Even before, after they graduated high school, we sent them to Torchbearer Bible schools. So they're
Yeah.
already off the continent. They're away from the phones. They're learning how to make Christian community. They're discerning good truth from heresy and things like that. So for Jamie Lynn to want to dive all over that world race, she's like, "Yeehaw! I'm at Disneyland. Let's go!" And she had a
Right.
great time. And the cool thing about it is, if you do this, you get invited on the parent vision trip.
Yeah, that was
So
really
we
cool.
got to go spend a week in Chiang Mai, and you're there with them,
Yeah.
going and doing ministry work together, worshiping with them,
Yeah.
seeing where they live and stuff like that. Although we're at the embassy suites and they're at a hostel, that's good for mom and dad. But it just opens your eyes to so much, and they come back changed for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So we're going to put a whole bunch of things in the show notes down below. We'll put a link to Adventures in Mission in the World Race, so you can see about that and things like that. But we highly encourage parents to, and like Seth's blog is going to talk about, it's hard. You're gripping that steering wheel tight, but there's so much more good that comes from investing in your adult children.
Yes. Yes.
You got
And
anything
letting them go.
And letting them go.
Yeah.
You got anything else you want to close with?
No.
No.
I'm
Awesome.
good. Thank you, Seth.
Thank you for being on the Parent Pivot podcast. Thank you for being such a dear friend of ours and for doing what you're doing. It's always good to connect with you. And
Yeah, it's a privilege. It's a privilege, and I've got a heart for parents. I mean, it was not easy for us. Not easy for parents these days. So if I can, anybody listening to this and they've got questions, they honestly want to have a conversation, I'd be happy to help them or connect them with somebody who can help them as well.
God, we appreciate that.
Great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So thanks for being with us on the Parent Pivot podcast. We'll be back next week with another edition.
Bye.
Sounds great.